Good afternoon, everyone. This is Matt Hardy, Program Director for Planning and Performance Management at AASHTO. Typically, Christos Unifontos from the Transportation Performance Management Pooled Fund, lead state of Rhode Island, DOT, would welcome you to our bi-monthly webinar, but he is unable to join us today. So I want to welcome you on his behalf. And so on behalf of the TPM Pooled Fund, I'd like to welcome you to number 3 in our TPM webinar series, sponsored by the TPM Pooled Fund, with support from the AASHTO Committee on Performance-Based Management Leadership, as well as FHWA. I'm broadcasting from my basement, and I apologize for not cleaning it up beforehand, but sometimes this is what you get. So I apologize for that, but hopefully it adds a bit of reality and just this is what life is right now. For more information on this webinar series, you can visit the TPM portal at tpm-portal.com. Click on TPM Webinar Series under Events in the main menu, and you can get a lot more information about this webinar, previous webinars, and a whole bunch of other resources that's available on the TPM portal. So typically, and I know that there are probably questions coming in right now, how can we get the slides? So we would typically make the slides available on the control panel that you could download during the webinar, but we have a few tricks up our sleeves today. So we don't want to sort of ruin the surprises until after the webinar has ended. At that point, we will make access to the links to the video available from the TPM portal. So again, tpm-portal.com. If you have any questions for the presenters during today's webinar or any suggestions for future webinar topics, we're always looking and open to suggestions. Please submit your comments or questions using the webinar's Q&A functionality. And as always, we will answer all of your questions during the Q&A session at the end of the webinar. So please type your questions as they go or as you have them. We will not lose them. And we will address Q&A after all the presenters have talked. And if for some reason we can't get to or we're unable to answer some of your questions, we will have them documented and we can follow. In our series is to support the broader transportation performance management community by sharing lessons learned, ideas, and knowledge with the transportation performance management community. Sharing knowledge and building capacity is an important part of the TPM Pooled Fund program. It's also an important aspect of the Committee on Performance-Based Management. So I just want to make a note that this year the Committee on Performance-Based Management is not having a traditional in-person annual meeting. We also made the decision not to have a sort of a more virtualized meeting over 3 days or 1 day a week over 4 weeks. We're going to have one single business meeting on Thursday, October 22nd from 1 to 5 p.m. More information will be available at the TPM portal. So if you're interested in participating in that, I would encourage you to join. There is no cost, but we feel the Committee on Performance-Based Management's leadership felt that these types of webinars, these types of meetings kind of has sort of filled the gap in some of the activities and some of the events that we would have done during a virtual meeting or in-person meeting. So with that, I think you're going to enjoy today's presentation. I hope we'll all learn a lot this afternoon. I'm certainly looking forward to it, as well as the tricks and the surprises. I have not taken a peek at the slides, so I look forward to that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Yana Park of Spy Pond Partners, who's been a great, a great partner. It's in their name, right? Spy Pond Partners. They've been a great partner with the TPM Pooled Fund. Lori, Andrew, Perry, all the folks over at Spy Pond, thank you very much for the time, effort, and talents that you put to making this a success. And Yana's going to go over the agenda for today's webinar. With that, Yana.
Thanks, Matt. So we're going to focus on TPM Communications from Federal Highways, academic, and state DOT perspective. For the agenda today, Nelson Hoffman from Federal Highways Transportation Performance Management Team will provide a brief welcome and federal perspective on TPM Communications. Next, we have Michael Pack of the University of Maryland Center for Advanced Transportation Technology Laboratory, the CAT Lab, better known as, will set the stage by discussing communicating effectively in the modern world through data and visualization. After Michael provides the context for our discussion, we'll hear from Patrick Cowley of the Utah Department of Transportation, who will talk about the agency's internal and external TPM communications, and will highlight a recent communication effort they undertook with their MPOs. Next, Gabe Phillips from the Washington State Department of Transportation will talk about the evolution of Washington State DOT's communication methods over time. And John Selmer from the Iowa Department of Transportation will wrap up our agency presentations for this webinar with a presentation on effectively communicating using data. Just another reminder, please submit your comments or questions using the Q&A feature of the webinar control bar at any time during today's presentation. And yes, as Matt already mentioned, the slides and the video will be available after today's webinar at tpm-portal.com. So let's get started with a welcome from Nelson Hoffman of Federal Highways. Nelson is a member of the FHWA TPM team. He's their program manager responsible for policy and guidance. Please join me in welcoming Nelson.
Sonia, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I really just want to emphasize the importance from Federal Highways of telling the TPM story. Lori, I don't seem to have the controls to share my screen right now. So, well, I will be brief. Wait, oh, here we go. Sorry, thanks. Sorry for the technical delay.
Sorry about that delay.
No problem. No problem. I don't know if you are yet seeing my screen.
We're seeing your email, not the website.
Yep.
All right. All right. Actually, so why don't we? Yeah. Are you now seeing the website?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Okay, sorry for the delay, everyone. So what I really want to do is talk about the importance of telling the story, the TPM story, from a federal perspective. And a lot of what we do in way of telling the story is sharing information, background information on regulations and guidance, and additional information about the basis of TPM from how Federal Highways is working to help state DOTs and MPOs implement that. But I also want to share with folks, if you haven't been to our site before that shows the state performance dashboard and reports, and this site is built on the information that state DOTs provide as part of the biennial reports. And for each of the states and the performance measures, there are information behind each of the performance measures, showing targets, actual conditions, and additional background information. The performance measures are broken up into individual panels. I'll go back to a larger state that has all of the panels for safety, highway condition, highway reliability, and emissions. Farther down on the site is information about urbanized areas and congestion reports. And then there's some additional links to provide additional background information. So when Federal Highways thinks about telling the TPM story, though we have a larger website with lots of information, this is really where we focus our primary attention on providing information that comes to Federal Highways via the Performance Management Form, the PMF. And we have made a number of updates to this site. An additional update is coming. And then, of course, after the close of the PMF and the mid-performance period progress report, the site will be updated again. The updates happen over time, but we will, within a few months of the close of the PMF, we will have the site updated with additional information. So with that, I will turn it back to Anya and Lori to continue the rest of the presentations.
Thanks, Nelson. All right, for our next speaker, we'll hear from Michael Pack of the University of Maryland Cat Lab. Michael is the director of the Cat Lab, where he works with a team of over 75 professional software developers and data scientists to make data more readily available and usable to transportation agencies through interactive visual analytics and related decision support tools. He previously worked at the University of Virginia's Smart Travel Laboratory and the Oak Ridge National Laboratory. He also has been the chair of the TRB Visualization Committee and has led several of the symposias they've run. So please join me in welcoming Michael.
All right, thank you. I assume everyone's seeing my slide deck right now. I'm going to be talking about how to communicate effectively in the modern world, specifically with data visualization and performance measures. So when you're going out and communicating with an audience, the type of audience that you're communicating with matters significantly. So you have to think, are you talking to engineers, planners, operators, some of your peers? Or are you talking to legislators, media, decision makers of the public? The type of communication style that you choose with each of these different audiences is going to change. But no matter who you're communicating with, internal or external, data and numbers in and of itself is not the goal and shouldn't be the goal. And part of the reason behind that is we deal a lot with big numbers in our industry, and big numbers are generally hard to comprehend. So let's think of this from a money perspective. Everyone try to visualize what a stack of $100 bills looks like if it's going to add up to $10,000. On the screen right now is what that looks like. Now think about how big a stack you would have to get up to $1 million. Just think about what that would be like. And this is what $1 million stack looks like. Now think about going from $1 million to $1 billion. Think about how big that stack is going to be. It's 10 pallets of those $10,000 stacks of bills right there. Now think of going from $1 billion to $1 trillion and how big that is, and the order of magnitude change that you're going to have with that. This is what $1 trillion would look like. It's 10,000 pallets and thrown in the White House and some big airplanes here just for scale. So it is very, very difficult for humans to understand the difference in these levels of numbers. And so if we're just throwing numbers out there on a screen, it's tough for people to really get a good sense of that. There's a whole book that is written on understanding numbers. It's called Enumeracy. It's a really fast book to read. I'd encourage everyone to look this up, buy it, and read it. It's a great short read on just mathematical literacy and its consequences in our everyday world. So instead, we want to focus on visual communication. Visual communication is really becoming a critical skill for everyone, not just data scientists, but any level of an organization. And the reason visual communication is so important is that everyone's mind is tailored towards visualization and picking up on visual cues. Your visual bandwidth is literally enormous. Your ability to perceive things like trends, clusters of data, gaps in data, outliers, things that fall outside of the norm, color, size, shape, proximity, all of that is enormous. And your ability to store and retrieve pictures in your mind is incredible as well. You're not going to remember a lot of the things that I talk about today, but you will probably remember a couple of the pictures that I show or something along those lines. So along those lines, let's go in and let's do a few experiments. First, I want you to guess this story. I'm writing this out. A broken family is reunited after the children enlist in the military, unaware that their father is a high-ranking official within the enemy force. Now, this is a very famous story, and I imagine many of you are struggling to figure out what this really is, although all of you have heard of it before. And if I had just shown you a picture, you would have immediately known that, oh, this is Star Wars, but my text description of it didn't really do it justice. So let's try another experiment. On the next slide, I'm going to show you some data, and I want you to find the 3 countries with the largest values beside them. I'm only going to give you 3 seconds to do this. 1, 2, 3. So if I were to ask each of you in a poll to tell me what you saw and which country had the largest number beside it, you'd probably struggle to give me the right answer. You might give me an answer, but scrolling through that table, which had dozens of values, was tough to do in a short period of time. So now let's do another experiment. On the next slide, I want you to, again, find the 3 countries with the largest values over them. And again, I'm going to give you 3 seconds to do this. 1, 2, 3. So at this point, everyone is pretty much familiar with a map. Everyone generally understands that large bubbles over top of a map probably represent a larger value. And if I were to ask each of you to give me an answer, we'd have more people that would have the right answer. We'll just go back and show the slide again. We've got China, it's got a really large bubble. India's got a large bubble. The United States has a large bubble. This happens to be a map of vehicular fatalities in different countries for a year, as was the table. But the map is a lot easier and quicker for people to understand. So visualization is important. But what makes an appropriate performance measure, whether it's TPM or some other or any sort of other performance measure? Well, in my opinion, good performance measures are like a good movie. They're going to tell you some sort of compelling story from beginning to end about a compelling issue, and it's going to make some important discovery or observation along the way. And there's no single number that can do this. You're going to need several key measures that, when you combine them together, point out the state of your system in a meaningful and easily understood way, and they tell a story. What's the insight that you're gaining from this data, from this thing that you're trying to tell the public or a decision maker or what have you? You're not just presenting data. So there's all sorts of different TPM and data visualization tools that are available on the market. Some of them are free, some of them cost money. There's a few that are in front of you right now that are developed by my lab. And they're all designed to help you visually explore data and then take the outputs of your exploration and put them in some sort of a report or a story that you would then communicate with other folks. So the Cat Lab has been spending a lot of time recently in developing stories or templates that help you to tell a story about different transportation performance measures. And we've been putting these templates up on our RITIS website so the agencies can download them and use them. We started off with an after action review template. This is it's kind of like an 8.5 by 11 pamphlet that you can print out that has several different pages for it. And the point of this is to be able to quickly and easily tell the story of how your agency managed a particular incident, some sort of a crash that had a major disruption along the roadways, and explain visually and with numbers how well you did your job and what the impacts were to the public. And again, these are templates that can be downloaded from our website. And if you use our tools, then you can drop in these different visualizations into these templates within just a few minutes. And then you've got a story in a pamphlet that you can take to an audience, whether that be a group of first responders and you're trying to encourage them to improve the way in which they manage incidents, or maybe it's an elected official and you want to brag about how well you did your job, or you want to encourage them to provide you more funding so that you can then go in and improve the way in which you respond to incidents. We've also worked with Georgia DOT to put together different project assessment reports that can be, again, put together really, really quickly using these visualization tools. This is an example from their regional traffic operations program, a template that they put together in PowerPoint. It's available on our website, where you can go in and very quickly talk about the impacts that a particular project that you did recently had on the traveling public. So what were the before conditions? What were the after conditions? How much time or money are you saving the public? And do that in a visually compelling way that tells some sort of a story. We've also got these holiday travel guides. It's kind of like a weather forecast, but for traffic. And these are templates, again, that you can download that make it so that you can literally go out and tell people what to expect with respect to travel. How bad is the congestion going to be during the week? Are you expecting there to be more crashes or a higher likelihood of crashes on a particular day of week versus another day of week? And this is an example of the Baltimore Metropolitan Council using this template to do a travel forecast study for the week of Thanksgiving. They did this a few years ago. Georgia DOT has used these templates as well and gotten a lot of good press from the media and the public because of their communication style and trying to get the word out to the public. Last but not least, we've also been working on these work zone impact communication tools. Again, these are PowerPoint templates that you can download, and then using several of our visualization tools, you can quickly go in and almost produce like a work zone audit and tell folks, okay, for the last week, here's how well we manage this particular work zone in a particular region. Sunday through Saturday, here was the worst day, the worst travel time, the worst queues, the types of delays that we added, whether or not there were additional crashes or whether or not we actually reduced the number of crashes. And all of these are things that you can take and then post on your website, can be printed out or used as part of the management of this moving forward. And it's one thing to have these templates, but you really need a how-to guide. So we've put a lot of time and effort into telling you how to go in and work with these templates. Or if you don't want to use our templates, we've got some design sheets. So here are some thoughts on how you should be producing your own templates or your own reports. Here's some icons that you can pull from and some color sets that we think are appropriate for use in templates as well. Now that's just a part of the story. It's not just as simple as going out and producing a graphic and saying you're communicating well. I do a whole lecture just on ethics in visual communication. So all these graphics that you might produce, if you use the wrong color or the wrong font, or if you size something inappropriately, you can actually have a negative impact on your communication strategy, or you can misuse your graphics in a way that leads the public or the decision makers astray. There's some great resources out there that talk at some length about this. I recommend a book by Donna Wong. She used to be in charge, she may still be in charge of the Wall Street Journal infographics department. And she's essentially put together all of their design guidelines for how they put together their graphics, and even basic strip charts and line charts, and some really good guiding principles on what you should or shouldn't be doing when it comes to designing visualizations. So my advice to all of you moving forward is to invest in tools that make it easier for you to work with this data, to tell your story, because data alone isn't the answer. This data is only useful when it's easily accessible, usable, and understandable, and you can transform it into some sort of story that helps your audience understand what it is you're trying to communicate with them. That's a brief overview of my thoughts on this. If you got any questions, feel free to reach out to me via email, or that's my cell phone number there as well. I'd be happy to help you all out with any projects you're working on. And I think we're about to see some good examples of states doing some of this and putting it to practice. I'll turn it back over to you, Lori. Yana.
Thanks, Michael. That was great to see. So for our first state DOT presentation, we'd like to hear from Patrick Cowley from the Utah DOT. Patrick is the Director of Transportation Performance Management for UDOT. He has 18 years of civil engineering experience in the fields of geotechnical investigation and design, roadway pre-construction, project management, traffic operations, innovation, process improvement, and performance management. All right, take it away, Patrick.
Yeah, they didn't have a degree in potpourri of engineering topics, so I just tried to list as much as I could. Thanks so much for this opportunity. I can see my screen just fine. Can you all see it? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Patrick, we can.
Okay, perfect. So I really appreciated Michael's presentation, and I wish he would have given that to me like months ago while I was putting this together. When asked to talk about how or to present on how we communicate our TPM, we have some unique circumstances that have led up to why we do what we do and what is happening. However, I hope that some of the lessons learned from what we've been able to accomplish will help some of you as well. What we quickly found out is that it doesn't matter what you say, it really matters what your audience is understanding. And so getting feedback and being able to receive questions and take that as opportunities to perfect your message has really served us well. And so where we started out with what we thought was the perfect infographic, questions would arise and confusion would ensue, and then we would have to create another one and another one and another one. And you'll see a series of those, but they all lead to what the overall story is we're trying to tell. And so when we talked about performance measures being like a really good movie, it's really communicating TPM is that way as well. So what I want to focus on today is how we've communicated TPM internally within our DOT and how an example of how we've done that externally, like Hyuna mentioned earlier. 2 years ago, about 2.5 years ago, our legislature gave us the opportunity to have another deputy director. And with that came a huge reorganization within the department on which groups went with which director and how they're going to do things. And we are still feeling those effects even today. And so when we communicate with a new director who hasn't been doing this before, there's no history of how we've communicated with FHWA and what AASHTO committees we're on and what reports we need approval on, communication has become paramount, just so that we are all in alignment with our executive director. Our deputy directors are working together really well, and how we communicate came to the forefront. So as we started down this path, defining who we are, right, understanding what skills we have, what responsibilities, how different groups of people who hadn't worked together before are now thrust together in the same divisions, understanding what processes we have, which ones are working, which ones need to be modified, and who we serve. Who is it that we're trying to communicate to? That was all super important for us to understand as we went through. Now, my apologies to AASHTO if I've infringed on any copyrights for the hexagon designs. But what we found is communicating in a language where people are familiar with TPM. They have the transportation performance management, they know transportation asset management, and they know the enterprise risk management icons. We modified them slightly for this division. So I am the TPM division director. My job is to make sure that we are all in alignment, that we are looking ahead for opportunities and making sure we're meeting commitments, and that we have a portion of our SPR program that supports this is spent in a way that's appropriate. And within our group, we have each one of those three that I mentioned earlier: performance management, asset management, and enterprise risk. But we also have this organizational management, or our process improvement group, in there. And this is one of the visual that we put together to just show that they are distinct and separate groups that have specific goals and what they do. And so this is with the help of FHWA, TPM website, and the AASHTO website. We're trying to use common language that people would see in AASHTO committee meetings or with national partners, that this is what we do. So when you see this elsewhere, you know what we're talking about. One of the first visualizations that we put together, and I apologize, this didn't go in the slideshow until like about 4 minutes ago when Michael was talking about visualization. We attempted to show our division like this, in more of a network setting, less hierarchical. You don't know who reports to whom or how the reporting structure is, but we tried to show some sort of visualization for each one of the products and services that we provide. And so if you'll indulge me, I'll go back one slide. Here is a high level, read it sort of thing. People can get lost in words sometimes and not quite understand who the general of the opposing army is. Well, if you have a picture of Darth Vader, you know. Well, we're hoping that with something like this, they can look and see, oh, okay, federal compliance. We have federal stewards, right? What is the tactical measure? It looks a lot like a performance measure. Is that the same thing? And enterprise risk and what all the different entities entail in there. And so we were hoping that with this, more visually, people could see that, yes, we have many products and services to provide to the department. What I would like to focus on today is specifically with the performance management area within this transportation performance management division, and some of the ways that we've communicated that. And so if we can move forward, the first one was we needed to fill the position. And we're still working on that part of it, but to communicate to our senior leaders the importance of this position, we created this one pager. And while not totally visually stimulating, it's much better than just paragraph after paragraph in an email to say, what is it that this person does? Why is it important that we fulfill it? What do they hope to accomplish over the next 1 to 5 years? What is the history of this position? What does the reporting structure look like? We tried to put that all into one simple document for them to look at. And as we are developing this, it made sense to us that, hey, maybe we should have these for other positions so that when people come in, they have a template for everything they're responsible for, right? It's one thing to tell them, hey, you've got this report and, you know, this committee meeting and all of these different things that you have to do. This is something visually that they can refer back to that is specific to their position. In this slide, transportation performance management within the department, we wanted to answer fundamentally 4 questions, right? Where do we want to go? What's our strategic direction? How are we going to get there? What are our plans? What will it take? What sort of projects are we putting in place? And then how did we do? Are we gathering the data to put it back into the cycle? And as we divvied up all the different divisions and areas within the department, we found that those questions were answered in very specific areas. That in the federal performance measures and our strategic direction is where our performance management or performance manager would do most of his work. Then how are we going to get there? And I know Minnesota uses like the phrase, the family of plans. And that's essentially what we're trying to communicate here. Is there's a lot of plans that we have that lead down to what will it take or what are our projects. And so as we're looking into this and trying to communicate internally, they say, well, where does the performance manager work? And how is that different from asset management? And we're able to take this visual flow chart and say, performance manager lives pretty much here in the strategic direction, federal performance measures, gathering data, visualizing, telling that story so that we can have those in our transportation plans, one of which is for our assets. And being able to take this and show and talk through what it is that the department does and how our folks fit into the success of the department has been very helpful. Recently, we had the opportunity to participate in an NCHRP panel implementation of Project 08-113, how performance, asset, and risk management interact. In some people's minds, they were all the same thing. In other people's minds, they had nothing to do with each other. And so this was our attempt at showing what each area does and how they might interact. And we chose to focus specifically on the TAMP. What is it that risk management does to give to the TAMP? What does performance manager, what sort of focus does he have when it comes to the TAMP? And our asset manager obviously is entrenched in that as well. We wanted to make sure that we were tying it to our federal performance measures as far as what do those other plans have to do with those performance measures and how they're not really included in the TAMP, that traffic and safety, they have their highway safety improvement plan. And the long range plan has more to do with capacity and our mobility measures. And so this is another one of those steps within the storytelling process to say, yes, they are connected. Yes, they are, but they are not the same circle. So when it came to understanding what the difference between why do we have federal measures and state measures, and I know there are other states out there that struggle with this as well. We had a great example from Minnesota where they developed a one-page document that explained the difference between federal measures and state measures and what they're used for. That we're finding that same conversation is so important. So as we described what those metrics are, we go to the basis of what it is we're trying to report, what it is we're trying to communicate to our federal partners. With FHWA, this is that performance period that we, for those performance measures, how we report, how often we get significant progress determinations, when do we have interim reports, and that this performance manager is responsible to make sure that each one of these boxes is understood, they have the information, and it's communicated well. In the same vein, we have our strategic goals for our state. Now, they line up very closely with the federal measures in the fact that we have our PM1, which is zero fatalities. We have the PM2, which is our preserve infrastructure. And we have the PM3, which is optimized mobility. However, how we come up with those indices is quite different. You can see underneath each one of those indices, there are a number of performance measures or key performance indicators that we rely on to come up with that index. The performance manager, his job or her job is to make sure that those aren't neglected, that they're being updated, that they're relevant, that we don't have other tactical measures that might be better to show how well we're doing. And so to show the folks in the department that are familiar with the strategic goals and how that performance manager interacts with it is super important. And even more on a granular level, each one of our divisions, they have their own separate performance measures that help tell their story. And so our performance manager then can help them to tell that story, make sure that the movie is really cinematically dynamic, and that it is a compelling story, so that we can share that with others within the department and partners outside, which we hope to. Today I focused in on the performance management side. We hope to do something very similar with our organizational, asset, and enterprise risk management areas as well, which then leads me to our external communication and the experience that we had just this last summer in interacting with our MPO and federal partners to make sure that we're providing the information we said we were going to. Back in 2018, when we kicked off the federal performance measure performance period, we put together a memorandum of agreement, an MOA, between all of the MPOs and our transit partners to outline what we said we were going to do, how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, and what they can expect from us. You can see sort of on that last page, we had everybody sign, we put the dates, and that this is how we are going to interact moving forward. And what's been great about that is we can always refer back and say, this is what we agreed upon, and now we're here to share this with you. Part of that agreement was to create a place where they could go and see those metrics. And so they can come to our website, and I know it's small and you're not meant to be able to pick apart everything, but we have our PM1, PM2, and PM3 metrics here. And each MPO is able to click on their MPO and see how they are measuring up to the state target. And with this, they have the power to have those conversations when it comes time to funding projects. You see that we have more poor roads percentage within our MPO than the state average, and what projects are coming up to fix that. They have the power and the transparency for how they measure up to those state targets that we've set. And if they so choose, they could set their own targets based on what they're seeing. And so with that, we went out this past summer and let them know that this year we are able to adjust those targets if needed. And so we went and met with each of the MPOs. We met with them together and individually to have these conversations, to talk about what recommendations from a department standpoint we wanted to change, and what we wanted to remain the same, and that even though we may be close to that target, we don't want to raise it up, but we think or lower it down or raise it up, whichever, but we want to keep it the same and see if we can meet that over the next 2 years. Having those graphics really did help the conversation. They could see instantly what that meant for them and their MPOs and overall as a state where we're headed. So at the end of those meetings, we summarized it all together and we talked about what is the target and did we recommend the change, so that they wouldn't have to remember all of this. I think it's so important to understand that not all the folks who are in the MPOs are attuned to what these metrics mean. And so this is where I feel we can improve much, much more, is telling that story in a compelling way rather than just putting, did we meet the target or didn't we? But what does it mean? What does truck travel time reliability really mean when the index is 1.2 versus 1.3? We can communicate that better. We summarized it here, but I appreciate the opportunity to perfect that message on into the future so that we don't tell a story that is not comprehended, or going back to that first slide, it doesn't matter what we say, it's what they understand, making sure they understand what it is that we're trying to say. And with that, I am grateful for this opportunity. I am happy to answer any questions. I will have to leave a little bit early, so if they come in via chat or email, I'm happy to answer any questions or share. And thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thanks, Patrick. And if you're not here where there is a question, Lori will make sure to make the connection. All right, so we have Gabe Phillips joining us from the Washington State DOT. Gabe works as the Tribal and Regional Integrated Planning Manager for Washington State DOT. In this role, he coordinates work between the state and Washington's 12 MPOs and 17 regional transportation planning organizations. Among his duties, Gabe is the chief facilitator for implementing TPM. Prior to his work at Washington State DOT, Gabe worked for a small MPO and also worked in the private sector. Now I'll turn it over to Gabe.
Thank you, Yana, and thanks for the opportunity to share today. I like where Patrick left off. A lot of my focus will be on our coordination efforts with the MPOs and RTPOs. RTPOs are specific to Washington State. They're regional transportation planning organizations, essentially the equivalent of MPOs for our rural areas in our state. So like I said, I'll be focusing on that quite a bit, but also talking about some of the new developments we've had with sharing data beyond our TPM federal requirements. And for those of you that were at the TPM peer exchange back in November in Minnesota, some of these slides might seem familiar. And some of the jokes will definitely be recycled, which I know is a bear because they probably were even funny to begin with. So I'm sorry already. But let's move on here. Make sure I'm moving along here. Okay, so what we have here on this slide is a framework for how we organize our coordination and collaboration with the MPOs, the transit agencies, and the state relative to our transportation performance management requirements. And so we have these three tiers of working groups. On the left in purple, we have maybe the group that meets most often and most into the weeds relative to the TPM requirements, the target setting technical teams. These consist of subject matter experts within DOT, staff level participants from the MPOs, the ones that are more in the details of the data and understanding what it means. And at these meetings, they happen periodically throughout the year. We talk about what the data means, where we stand, formulate recommendations for the framework group, which I'll talk about in just a second. And it also consists of we even have some local agency planners and engineers from some of our larger cities participate because they're particularly interested in the PM2 measures. Also, there is the working group, and this is a second group that is maybe a step higher level within WashDOT. It's primarily focused within WashDOT, and that's to ensure that communication is happening between the different departments, divisions within our department to make sure that there are no surprises when things get to the framework group level. The framework group consists of the directors of all of our MPOs, all 12 MPOs in our state, and WashDOT's division directors. And these are the ones that we have these meetings maybe once or twice a year, and they're used to make recommendations to WashDOT executives about target setting, policy direction, and data sharing ideas. And some of I'll highlight one of the things they recently did here just in a second. And then of course, those recommendations are shared with our MPOs and with our WashDOT executives who then go on to finalize our target setting processes. Okay, so one thing that the framework group made a recommendation on fairly recently, and Patrick also alluded to this is the written provisions in our Metropolitan Planning Agreement. And if you read the CFR, it talks about how it should be these provisions should be added to your metropolitan planning agreement or documented in some other means outside of the agreement. And that's the route we have chosen to do here in Washington over the last several years. What we do is we create a memo that we develop collaboratively with all of our MPOs and transit agencies that is addressed to FHWA and FTA and illustrates, here is how we're going to share data, here is the major milestones for target setting that we have over the next year. And it's nice because we review it annually, and we make a new plan each year for what we're going to do the following year. And I don't expect you to be able to read all of these slides, all of this text, but the general idea here is it lists in rows each of the major dates that we foresee over the next year, and those columns on the right side indicate which performance area it relates to. And when there's a meeting, when there's a checkpoint, when there's a deliverable, it's all identified. This table is actually an appendix to the memo we write to FHWA and FTA. And we found it works very well, particularly this year. This is the first year we've really gone into detail with a chart like this, and our MPOs in particular have been very appreciative, so they know when to expect things to come up, and they can kind of refresh their memory when they need to. So now diving into an example of how we share data. Again, this would be something we identified in that memo. What you see on the slide is an example of a spreadsheet that our subject matter experts in our crash division at WashDOT put together a spreadsheet that identifies our statewide target for each year. So we're actually in the midst of updating this as we speak. So this is an older version that we see, but we set this, the targets are in here, and then our MPOs, all of our MPOs across the state have decided to support WashDOT in achievement of the target, so they haven't set their own targets. Nevertheless, particularly their policy boards are very interested in knowing how they are doing and how they are contributing to those statewide targets. So the way this spreadsheet works is, you see there's a purple cell right at the top. There's a drop-down menu there, and it lists all 12 MPOs. And when you select your MPO, it shows your portion of the statewide target. Recognizing that they are not setting their own targets, they still want to know how they're doing. And so this allows them to have conversations with their policy boards about how they are contributing to the statewide target, and helps them identify where they can make improvements and change investment decisions to try and achieve a higher performance. Another thing we found is not only do they want to know by MPO boundary, but some of our multi-county MPOs have maybe a sense of sub-regional pride, where they want to know how their own particular county is doing. The policy board members want to know how their own particular county is doing. So this spreadsheet not only breaks it up by MPO boundary, but it also breaks it up by county boundary, so that our MPO partners can answer those questions when their board asks them. So we share this data, the safety data. We do something very similar with our PM2 measures, and for PM3, we're part of the pooled fund, and we have access to the RIDIS tool, and we share access to with our MPOs for sharing the data in that way. Another way I think Washington maybe has set a good example as far as sharing data is our folios. These are very popular, particularly with our MPO partners, and there's one for each performance area, and there's a couple of them highlighted on the screen there. And these are the primary communicating device for saying first of all, establishing what our target is after we've set it, but it also talks about how it's calculated, what the data is, what our status is, and some of them even address where we plan on going in the future. And here is where I as a WashDOT employee, am contractually obligated to say that FHWA Office of Performance Management has taken our lead to develop their fact sheets after our own example here. So they saw them in the Performance Measurement Conference in 2015. and we're very excited. So we may be holding on to past achievements a little too much there, but again, I've received direction that I should share that information with all of you. So this slide is just, if you open up that folio, one of those folios, this is the safety one. It shows some of the information that's in there. So very roughly on the left, it's a summary of the performance area measures, summary of how targets are set, and some of the performance to date on the right side with the charts. And I'll come back to a specific example of what we learned with one of these towards the end here. So another way we share performance is with in our corridor capacity report. I highlighted one particular page. This page in particular gets a lot of attention from the media, especially, but also legislators. And I recognize you can't see it, but it has things in here like it shows a typical commute by car, by HOV, and by transit. And how long it takes from a given point in this case it's the Puget Sound region, so from Everett to Seattle, and it shows a typical drive and then the 95th percentile. So how much basically a measure of reliability, and it's very useful. Like I said, in media reports, the news usually grabs this and focuses on it when we update the corridor capacity report. We have been, in the past, we were on the schedule of updating it every year. We've since taken a pause, and I'll talk about that in just a second, but we've paused to reassess, is this the best way to share this information? So again, it's been a valuable tool, and really for those nuggets that people can use in a media soundbite, or a legislator can use when they're proposing a bill. So diving in a little deeper on how we're updating the corridor capacity report. A year or so ago, we did an engagement process to see how is this report being used and who is using it. And we found that our stakeholder group is very diverse, this process of diving in and seeing how it's being used, it's helped us identify who our customers are, what are they looking to this document for compared to other documents where we share information, where do we need to update or improve our analysis, and is it currently meeting the needs, and how can it be improved? We found that 2/3 of the stakeholders use this corridor capacity report in their typical work. So now shifting gears from the corridor capacity report to the gray notebook, which is this cover doesn't give the name of the document justice, because when it first came out, it was exactly that, a gray notebook, very plain and not geared towards being really for the public to really digest it. Think of bureaucratic documentation, and that's what the gray notebook was. And for some reason, we keep that name to remember our bureaucratic past. There's been some great updates. You see the graphics here, make it look more like a tabloid than informational report. And it is still, if you look at the gray notebook, it is still very robust, and all the data and analysis that had traditionally been there is there. But I think we've made strides to make it, portions of it that are maybe of particular interest to external partners, a little more interesting and easy to understand. And one example being here. So here's some of our particular indices we're concerned in, and we show it in an infographic type presentation where we show our trend line as those lines you see, and we also include which way we want that line to be going, which helps those who aren't neck deep in data analysis, but more of the layman, to understand what is important and what is good performance. And then an even greater subset or smaller subset of that information, we boil down into an even more infographic-y type presentation, where some of those things we know our external partners, the public and the media, are particularly interested in. We highlight those and show how we're performing, and this is also a tool that we use to report our performance to the legislature as they prepare budgets. Okay, so I'd like to talk now about a lesson learned we had with PM1 in particular. A couple years ago, when we first adopted our targets, we had one methodology we used to calculate our targets called the Target Zero methodology. Our state Traffic Safety Commission has a policy of striving to achieve 0 fatalities and serious injuries by 2030. So our initial methodology for calculating our targets mirrored that approach. So it essentially took the most recent 5-year average and straight lined that number to 0 by 2030, and that gave us our target, as you can see the green dot on the slide. Well, we had I think we did a really good job when we first adopted our targets. We worked very closely with our MPO partners. We worked with them, how do we want to do this methodology? And we had a lot of buy-in. Everyone understood what we were doing, and everyone was very happy. We had a bit of a sophomore slump, and there was a bit of staffing change, maybe a bit of sense of relief that we got through that initial push of target setting, and maybe we kind of rested on our laurels a little. Well, anyway, what happened is WashDOT changed the methodology we use to calculate targets to what we call a maintenance target. And that is really taking the 5-year average trend line rather than making that line go to 0 by 2030. It's using the trend line. And if it's decreasing, if it's increasing, then we just use the most recent 5-year average. Well, the real problem there is we changed the methodology without coordinating with our MPO partners. And until literally they had their 1 week before they had to adopt the targets when we told them that we changed the methodology. It was a real black eye on our part, and we definitely learned our lessons. But it was and so that created a little bit of a sour taste with our MPO partners. And so we worked with our MPO partners early in the process, because of course WashDOT then decided to flip the methodology back to the Target Zero process the following year. And it turned out that I thought that all of our MPO partners would want that, since there was such an outcry about when we switched it, but it was about half and half. Some liked the new methodology, some liked the old methodology. And what we found that even though only half of them ended up getting what they wanted, because we worked early and often with them and made sure that they had an opportunity to voice their concerns through the framework group process, through the tech team process that I introduced at the beginning, because they had that opportunity, all of them were satisfied. Even though they didn't necessarily get the target methodology that they would prefer, they were satisfied with the process and appreciated that they had the opportunity to voice their opinion and that WashDOT considered it. And so that was our comeback. I think we've done a very good job since then. I think that spawned the memo I talked about earlier, our other written provisions of our Metropolitan Planning Agreement. That it spawned our desire to make sure we're really clear the process and timeline. If and then when we're talking about changing methodology for calculating safety targets, that needs to happen here. And then there's a couple more meetings that have to happen after that. And that's all laid out a year in advance, so everyone understands, including WashDOT, that we all need to come to the table and work through this. And then
okay, I'm just giving you a 2-minute warning, okay?
Thank you very much. I will very briefly share a recent experience when COVID broke out. As you may know, Washington had the first documented cases in the nation, and our governor wanted to react quickly. And so we had a very robust data gathering process. Among other sources, Governor Inslee was using our traffic data as an indicator of whether or not people were doing social distancing or sheltering in place. And so WashDOT was looked to very early to provide data to the day. Every morning we were providing yesterday's traffic counts to the governor and other data processes, so that the governor and his cabinet can help could decide what to do next related to the COVID pandemic. And I will just briefly show this link on the left side, the one that is purple there, we have a dashboard that has all of our indicators. It shows where target travel is even today, or sorry, traffic volumes are even today relative to where they were a year ago. And you can see the trend lines and how we're adjusting to the COVID pandemic. Happy, if you have any questions, I'm happy to address them. It looks like there's something in the chat box, but maybe it makes sense to wait till the end for that.
Yes, we'll take that at the Q&A.
Sure. Thank you very much, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Gabe. I'm wrapping up our presentations for today. We'll hear from John Selmer of the Iowa DOT. John is the director of the Strategic Performance Division at Iowa DOT. The Strategic Performance Division was created in 2012 to focus on overarching transformative initiatives for the department. The division has 3 core areas of emphasis. 1, strategic planning, performance management, and leadership development, employee engagement. 2, strategic communications and legislative policy. And 3, business analytics and research. John has been with the department for 31 years in various capacities. Now let's hear from John.
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, I'll go ahead and proceed. I know I'm going to make Yana nervous. She indicated in the beginning before we were prepping, I gave one presentation off of one slide that took 20 minutes. So I've got about 30 slides here, but I promised to go quick. The first slide will be a little bit of background, and what you'll see is it ties in pretty good with Michael's presentation, but I have some slightly different nuances and takes in terms of communicating data effectively. So areas that I'll be looking at are really just 3 areas, a couple of them related to our snow removal operations, and another looking at infrastructure, specifically looking at bridges. But some of the initial thoughts that I have is that meaningful communication comes at a potential risk, and I probably should strip potential. It comes at a risk. Anytime we're out there dealing with the different constituencies, if we really want to have an impact with them, engage with them, they can misinterpret that information or use it differently or not the way that we want or feel that it should be used. Data and tools allow us an opportunity for greater impact. The technology that we have can be very striking in terms of the visualizations and how we do communicate our data, but they can also hinder the message. And many times I've seen it where you can put your audience in a fog or actually feel that maybe you're arrogant and you're not really wanting to engage. You're trying to confuse the message with a lot of data. My third point here is, I've heard a lot about telling the story, and I agree with that, but as my staff knows me, I always look at the nuances. I'm more about revealing the story. I don't know how to tell a compelling story to 3.3 million Iowans. There's a different story that each of them are looking for, but I do believe that I need to have the opportunity to provide the context for how I believe it may or should be interpreted, but I need to give them an opportunity in which to interpret it for themselves based on their situation. And kind of going off track a little bit, I look at COVID-19 too. It's been very interesting. The state of Iowa has a nice dashboard with a lot of data in terms of COVID, but as we all realize, it's being interpreted in multiple ways. And people aren't interpreting it the way that those who developed the dashboard thought it would be interpreted. So I think we need to recognize that. And if your message is ineffective, are you in the position to understand why and change it? Or is it the right message to begin with? I look at performance measures or data. The purpose really is about engagement. It's about learning. It's about becoming better. It's ultimately about informing ourselves to make better decisions and hopefully have advocates that want to go along with us. In some cases, and we've been guilty, some Some of our performance measures actually had no value to the department. They looked good, they were low risk, they measured something, but we weren't changing our behavior, making a different decision. So Track a Plow is a process and application that we developed a few years back in terms of trying to engage more effectively with the public. Typically, most northern states had some type of mapping that would indicate the condition of the highway system during a winter storm, and just colored lines and maybe some icons showing that there was some blockage or things like that. And it really didn't give the public an understanding of the dynamic nature of the storm, not readily. Other issues with this is that the public at times felt they were being manipulated. You know, if this data wasn't updated, except for maybe every few hours, and they're out there driving and they're not seeing what we're showing on the map here, they're wondering what are our intentions? Are we trying to keep them off the roads? You know, they want to be engaged in this decision making, and so how can we provide them information, performance information? So what we came up with was another map that actually showed the orange icons are locations of all the plows during a winter event, and the black icons are actually miniature cameras that actually showed imagery that we're taking at a regular pace with each snow plow on the route, in trying to allow the public to understand what's happening during this event. And what that did is show them the dynamic nature. It also showed, I think, reinforced, we're willing to show the data in terms of what's happening there out on the road specifically. And I think with this, I think they felt more engaged as a partner, and I'll show you some examples of that as to their response to this website. Now, the other aspect is internally, in all these cases that I'll show, the business units were not necessarily enamored with us giving this to the public. There was a lot of fear that we would be second guessed, that people would be just using this data to make us look bad. So there was that fear, even so much so that when we came out, even nationally, national conferences, peers were telling our business unit that we were kind of nuts for trying to put this information out there. The next step we looked at is, well, we're just not an island in the middle of the country. There's other states that also have weather information or snow fighting information out there. So we went out there and stole a lot of information that we could find and put it on our map, and wanted to provide that also for the public. So as you can see, nice imagery. And what we also did in the next phase was just start collecting that. Can we aggregate that? This is some imagery looking from different areas. If you stopped at a rest area, we had monitors in there that you could also look and see what does it look like down the road. Should I be making reservations to stay the night somewhere, or should I continue on? We also created a dashboard like this for different school districts that are determining whether they want to close their schools for that day, have a snow day. We also provided all this information with direct feeds to our news media so that they could be advocates for us and get the word out there. And so not only on their newscasts, but also their tweets and other information. And as you can see, that bottom picture is probably very compelling to the public, that maybe I shouldn't go out there today. It doesn't look that good, and we probably shouldn't have even been out there. Here's another one showing why it's not advised. So again, it has much more greater impact than a colored line on a map. So in terms of public response, you know, we had a number of them, but I kind of like this one. You can track a plow in Iowa. This is pretty badass out there. So, you know, really showed that the public wasn't using this in a way to second guess us. They were very appreciative of the information we were giving them and allowing them to be a partner in the decision. And my belief is that the public, and I think we all do, probably has the greatest impact in terms of the safety on our highway system. If we can give them good information, actionable information, they'll make better decisions, which would ultimately, hopefully, reduce crashes and incidents that we don't like seeing occur. Another one saying this is just phenomenal that we put this out here. And we've got even from different countries. This one translated was Iowa's got a map that shows the condition of the roadway. They must be used to dealing with megastorms type of information. Then even our partners at PIARC also had a comment in terms of how this information is helpful. So that, this is one way, I think, in making performance measures meaningful. We collect other data, but how can we provide it to the public and also allow them to impact performance of the system? And this is a great measure here. As you can see, for a year period, we had 20 million hits. If I look at our other performance data in terms of pavement condition, crash a little bit better, other indicators, this is probably a factor of 100,000 more hits in terms of interest. And you can see just peaking where the storms are. So this is a good measure to show how effective are you in terms of your communicating. They're coming to the site and wanting to know what's happening. With that, I'll jump to another one, just bridge reporting. And again, this is knowing your audience, as was explained earlier. Annually, the department is required to give a report to the legislature in terms of the condition of the county bridges out there. And so we have dutifully done that. And typically the report looks something like this, in which the counties are listed and the different status of the bridges are listed, what's been the change over the year. The problem with this is that as I'm dealing with a senator or representative, their districts don't have counties in alphabetical order. It's nice we got it alphabetized here, but if I'm someone who's got 5 counties in my area, now I've got to disaggregate this, combine my areas, and try and figure out what's going on. And then even looking at this terminology, it doesn't strike me as to what's happening. So we had to figure out a different way in which to interact with them. So what we did is created a map in terms of trying to look at that. And on the left side, you'll see a column there that we can either look at this map in terms of all Iowa bridges. There's 24,000 bridges. How many are within the county system, state system, and local system? We can break that down. Then on the top, you see the tabs. We could break this down by Senate district, House district, by county, by city, if you're looking at all Iowa bridges. And then just clicking within one of the districts, a simple aggregation of the bridges within that district. And at this level, we're not zooming in, but you can zoom in, and I'll show you that to get some more information. And again, this is, to me, is part of revealing the story as we zoom in. I might not be interested in all the state, or I might be interested in the bridge next to my home. And so that's much more compelling to me than just broad numbers in terms of Iowa's got 4,600 structurally deficient bridges. I want to know what's happening to me and how is it impacting my community. So with this, different icons and trying to make it understandable to people, you can see we have concentric circles that represent whether there's a weight restriction, whether it's at that point functionally obsolete. These are older slides. We've updated the map in terms of looking at the newer designations, structurally deficient, and then good, fair, poor condition. So people can quickly look at the different bridges, and then you can click on a specific bridge and get some information about the daily traffic, its length, and the detour length if it is closed. And here we're just, if you click on there, state bridges, now we can get down to just looking at state bridges and get that information and declutter it, and ultimately zoom into a specific bridge and have the satellite imagery that goes with this. Now, what was interesting with this is when we just handed out the spreadsheet or the listing, we really didn't have that much engageful discussion. Once we started showing a map and showed them how they can have access either through their phone or their computer, it was more meaningful. As you're looking at the condition of the bridges, are there clusters of the bridges that are maybe going to be significant for my district? It even showed some, what I would say is misunderstanding. We had one representative want to know why in Page County had, it appeared to be twice the number of bridges as his county, but his population was probably 5 times the size of Page County. And so, you know, there's different mental thinking that isn't quite correct, that, you know, the number of bridges is not related to the population size and things like that. And so this has been helpful, I believe, in allowing them to look at it at a statewide perspective, which is their responsibility. As I said, this is with elected officials, but then also being able to drill down and even with their own constituents. The last example I'll show, and this wasn't favorably received either by those responsible for winter operations, is our winter cost calculator. And this again is where color is important. We have some costs associated to the roadways during a 48-hour period, and we can change that period, where kind of the blackish color is high material cost or total cost, orange was average, and then blue was low. And we just didn't want to use red, yellow, green to convey that maybe red is something bad. You know, we're not saying anything's bad here. We're just saying this is where the material is going. We would always get calls from the media or even the legislature as we had a big storm. What did that storm cost us? How's our budget doing? And so what this map will do is we'll constantly update every 15 minutes during a storm and tabulate the cost. So you can see on the bottom, the total cost for the state is 1.3 million, where materials, labor, and equipment are shown there. And then we can also, as you change the zoom level, if you want to look at half the state, it'll automatically update. And if you want to check it by your home and look at specific roadways, you can check that. And so here we've also done it such that the major municipal areas, municipalities, you can click on there on the bottom left and kind of see what the cost has been for that city, that community. And then there's a box up there. You can click on specific links to see how much time we spent on there. Again, how much salt have we applied? What's the labor cost? And those indicators. And part of that, again, is allowing people to understand what it does cost to fight a storm, and also then allow us, I think, to have meaningful engagement. If someone's complaining about they didn't like the condition, we can tell them how many times we were there. We can tell them if you want a higher level of treatment for that roadway, this is what the cost is going to be, because we're just giving you the raw data. And again, we make this available to the public so that they can look at it, dig into it as much as they want to. A lot of them, it's just here with the media taking it, they're saying that we used 2 million pounds of salt in the past 48 hours and had 1,000 hours of employee time in which to address the storm. And then finally, I'll just add that, you know, there's other ways that we're looking in terms of performance. Real ID, how pervasive, now that we have a delay with COVID, you know, we're trying to look at it, are there certain demographic data in terms of, are we missing things, how to message, organ donor. Future track a plow, we're looking at how can we provide that information directly into nav systems or and not having to use our website. And then open data portal, I believe, similar to Utah and other states. And then really story mapping, I'm fortunate in where I'm at is that I have communication folks reporting to me along with the GIS folks, and can try and aggregate this or these stories. It's very difficult for a single business unit to be able to pull this together. And it takes a multidisciplinary action in which to, I think, take these next steps in reporting performance and engaging the public and allowing them to actually reveal the importance of it to themselves. And with that, I'm done with my presentation.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
Thank you.
John. Why don't the presenters just go on camera if you can, and there's a question for Michael. How can we access the Cat Lab templates he made reference to?
So they're posted on some of our websites, but you can also email me directly if you can't find them, and I'll get you what I can.
All right, that sounds good. So, you all, okay, oh, here's another one. So, DOTs tend to hire engineers, planners, and technicians. How have your hiring practices changed to allow for types of reporting discussed during the webinar? For example, has Iowa hired data analysts for the Strategic Performance Division?
We do have some, we need more. And I think we're woefully lacking like other DOTs. And I'm part of a joint task force looking at the impacts of digitalization. And that's what we're looking at is data scientists, business analysts, data analysts out there. I'm fortunate, many of you know Matt Hobrick is very good at this, and David Putz on my team. But we're deriving a lot of information. We're gathering a lot of information that we haven't had the ability to really dig into it, and part of that is realizing that we're probably not going to be able to. So what's the partnership in terms of using external partners with ourselves? What is our role, and how do we start shifting in the future?
How about you, Gabe?
At this point, hiring seems kind of like a pipe dream for us with COVID and in Washington State. If you follow our politics, we recently had an initiative that drastically cut some of our funding. So we're looking at severe cutbacks over the next biennium, or several biennia. That said, that means we need to be creative, and we have multidisciplinary people on our teams. I'm in the planning division of WashDOT, and I can speak, I know we have professional communicators on staff, writers, and even research analysts who had previously worked in our library services or on our team, and they're helping us with developing the right way to engage community. Those are a little more focused on outreach and community engagement efforts. But things are changing, right? We have to be creative. What used to be 3 positions, now we have to work into 1. So we're going to be looking for dynamic backgrounds that allow us to cover a lot of the bases.
All right. So a final question. You all had, I think you're all aligned in what you want to achieve with communications, but all of you have different ways that you've approached it to make advancements. So if you had a magic wand or a magic bullet that would give you something that really would advance your practice, what would that be? Let's start with Michael. Put you on the spot, Michael.
I keep going back to tools. There's no reason why we should all have to individually hire data scientists on our team. We don't have the budgets to do that. I mean, we'd like to, right? But we don't have the budgets to do that. So we need to be enabling all of our staff with some form of web-based tools that allow anyone, regardless of your education upbringing, to go in and ask some questions, get some answers, and be able to export that into some sort of PowerPoint, something or other, a Word document, and then go and talk to someone about your findings.
Mhm.
You need to enable folks that way.
Yeah. How about you, John?
I don't think I have an answer for that. I'm not satisfied with just one on that. You know, I believe we do have people talented, but there's also the issue of, I think, opening their minds to some possibilities that, you know, many times data and analysis is just used to justify a foregone conclusion. And if it doesn't jive with what you're doing, or you're not looking at it, I think with an open mind to be challenged, that's the difficulty. So I agree. I think, you know, I don't know if we've hit it yet. You know, we have different committees trying to look at this. You know, is there a way of DOTs working more effectively together and trying to come up with these key indices or ways of analyzing how do we make that part of the committee's work and along with TRB?
Mhm. Yeah. How about you, Gabe?
Boy, I sure hope there's no one else from WashDOT on this call. So what I would say is, you know, we have a lot of difficulty in a big organization, 7,000 employees. There's a lot of good work that's being done, but it doesn't happen in a coordinated fashion sometimes. And so it really, what my magic wand would be, and again, my background is I'm a former MPO employee, relatively new to WashDOT, really an advocate for MPOs in our state. I would love if we could figure out a way to get more coordinated before we move forward on things, so that it's one WashDOT voice that comes out. I really wish we could do a better job at that, and we're working on it. We're getting good, but we could be better.
Thanks, everyone. All right, so we're just past the end time. Our next bi-monthly webinar will be held on November 18th at 2 p.m. Please continue to send us ideas for webinars you'd like to see. And just as a final reminder, for more information, you can always visit the AASHTO TPM portal. That's tpm-portal.com. And there you're going to find the presentation and video from this webinar. Thank you, and hope to see you in November. And thank you so much to all of our presenters. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.